My dad told everyone he was planning a wedding to give me a future, but the truth, he was staging a transaction to take my house. At the party, he handed me legal forms, right between the cornbread and the toasts. My name wasn't even spelled right on the invitations. And when I asked why, he said, "People know who you are, that's what matters." But do they? Because in that moment, I wasn't a daughter. I was a signature waiting to be signed, and the worst part? I almost did. But what stopped me wasn't anger, it was the sound of my mother's voice, the one they didn't plan for. So ask yourself, what do you do when your own family sets the table, but never plans for you to sit at it? The kettle clicks off just as the sun breaks past the fence. I reach for the mug with the chip on the rim, same one I've used for years, and pour the coffee. It's not fancy, nothing about my mornings is. I lay the gray tea cloth on the table like I always do. It's the one I knitted for my father after Mom passed. He never said a word about it, but I keep laying it down, like setting a table for someone who won't come. The house is quiet, always is, unless the news is on or Silas is shouting about gas prices. But even then, the silence sits heavier than his voice ever could. I clean the counter, wipe down the crumbs no one else notices. My siblings, they send flowers, text once a month, but I'm the one here, on site, like a hospice nurse with no hours off and no pay. No one asked me to stay, not directly, but they all expected it. In this house, I once told Vera next door, silence is the currency. And I've been paying the rent with it for years. I don't say that out loud anymore. I had a job in Little Rock, a good one. Office manager, full benefits, good people. But when Mom died, I packed 2 suitcases, left the lease to my roommate, and told myself I'd be back in 6 weeks. That was 11 years ago. My brother Clyde calls every Christmas. He's got twins in Omaha and a boat he doesn't use. Marla, my sister, sends gift baskets, usually low-sodium crackers and wine we don't drink. But I'm the one driving Silas to the doctor. I'm the one who knows where the insurance folder is. I'm the one who stands between him and forgetting the stove's on. They say thank you, with money. Zelle transfers for groceries, always exact. Sometimes $12.33, sometimes just $4.99, followed by a text. Buy Dad some soup? You know what $4.99 buys? A can of soup, and the insult that my time's worth pocket change. I started logging every payment in a little ledger I keep by the fridge. Not because I want reimbursement, because I want to remember. Silas doesn't talk much anymore, except when the TV's on. He eats at 6, complains about whoever's in office, then goes to bed with a stack of Reader's Digests he doesn't really read. When I mentioned remodeling the bathroom because the tiles are cracked and mold's creeping in, he said, "Why invest in something temporary?" I wasn't sure if he meant the house or me. Last week, I overheard him on the porch talking to Mr. Lewis from church. I was folding laundry by the window, curtains drawn, but cracked just enough. Silas laughed and said, "Delaney? Oh, she's just helping out until she finds a man." That's how he's been framing me. Not as a daughter, not as a caretaker. As a placeholder, waiting on life instead of living it. That stung. Not because I didn't expect it, but because I did. Marla's the strong one. That's what people say. Clyde's the successful one. And me. I'm the quiet one, which in this family is code for the obedient one. I tried dating once. A teacher, recently divorced. Good man. Silas didn't like the sound of divorced. Said it meant trouble. The relationship fizzled. Not because the man wasn't kind, but because I couldn't picture bringing him here. Into this silence. Into this setup. Being the youngest always meant being last in line, even for love. We don't talk about things here. We act like everything's fine, as long as dinner's on time and the lawn's mowed. We don't say what we need. We just imply it. We don't ask each other questions. We assume, and if we're wrong, we just get quiet. Sunday night, after cleaning up the plates, Silas looked up from his newspaper and said, "You know, Pastor Rhett is still single. Comes from a good family." I didn't say anything right away. I just wiped the table like usual. But something inside me cracked, so quietly I almost missed it. A man with property, Silas added. That's what you need. He wasn't joking. I forced a smile, nodded, said nothing. But in my chest, something shifted. He didn't see me as a person. He saw me as a liability needing coverage, a house without insurance, a burden needing a buyer. I sat down later that night, opened the ledger, flipped to the last page. There was an entry, $4.99, soup. I traced it with my finger. Then I turned the page without writing anything. It was Marla who called me first, not to ask, but to inform. Dad's throwing a little get-together, she said like it was no big deal. You and Rhett, Sunday after next, just show up looking decent. Vera's lending her patio chairs. That's how I learned I was having an engagement party. Nobody asked what I wanted. The menu was set. The guest list was all Silas's church friends, most of whom could barely remember my name. The decorations were rustic. Bible verses stitched onto napkins, mason jars filled with baby's breath, folding tables arranged in the backyard. There was even a homemade banner that read, "God bless this union." Not our union, this union. Like a business deal. Rhett didn't say much in the days leading up to it. He's busy greeting guests, Silas told me, as if that was normal for a man who barely looked at me when we were in the same room. The air was warm that day, too warm for spring. My dress clung to my back by the time the first car pulled into the gravel drive. Marla hovered near the door, clipboard in hand like some wedding planner wannabe. She gave orders to volunteers from the church, correcting table placements, fluffing centerpieces. I tried to stay out of the way. While grabbing extra paper cups from the kitchen counter, I noticed a stack of invitations left unattended, printed ones, cream-colored, gold trim, the kind that looked more like a fundraiser than a celebration. My fingers froze when I saw the name. Charlene, not Delaney. Charlene. I stood there for a few seconds, unsure if I was being dramatic or just finally seeing the truth for what it was. I took one of the invitations to Silas, who was adjusting his tie by the mirror in the hallway. "Dad," I said, holding it up, "they spelled my name wrong." He barely glanced at it. "People know who you are. That's what matters." I didn't push. But it felt like being erased, just enough to keep me present, not enough to be acknowledged, like a placeholder at a dinner table where everyone else already had their name engraved. That was the first cut that didn't bleed, the kind that just burned. Silas raised his glass after dinner, standing under the patio lights like some preacher in his own chapel. "To Rhett," he began, "a man of faith and stability. Finally someone who can guide this house with strength." Applause. Cheers. A few nods from the men in suits at the far table. I smiled, because that's what women do when the spotlight points elsewhere. My name wasn't mentioned, my brother didn't show. Marla stood off to the side, proud and perfectly composed, like she'd curated this moment. I was referred to, not spoken to. Rhett gave his own toast. Vague, hollow. "I'm grateful to be joining such a solid family," he said. Not once did he say my name. Not once did he say, "I love her." I felt like I was fading inside my own body. A slow breath caught in my chest, trapped behind my ribs. People clapped. I couldn't tell if it was for him or for the idea of him. After the toasts, we were directed toward the buffet table. Fried chicken, green beans, cornbread, banana pudding, the kind of spread my mother used to make before her back gave out and her smile grew tired. I looked for my place card. It was taped to a small table off to the side. Near the trash bin. Rhett was seated at the main table with Silas and 3 church board members. Their laughter was loud. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I sat by myself. Paper plate, plastic fork, lukewarm food. No one asked if I needed anything. No one offered to switch places. Maybe they didn't notice. Or maybe they did. Vera passed by, catching my eye. She leaned in and said quietly, "You okay, hun?" "This don't look right." I gave her the kind of smile that women like us perfect over time, tight-lipped, polite, the kind that covers 1,000 cracks. "It's just a party," I said. "I'll clean up later." I stayed long enough to clear plates, thank the volunteers, and collect the leftover containers. When the crowd thinned out and the lights were unplugged, I returned to the main table, the one where they'd toasted to a man, a legacy, a future that didn't have room for my name. I traced my fingers over the tablecloth. It was rougher than I remembered. Borrowed, probably. Like everything else that day. I thought about the tea cloth from my kitchen, the one I made with my own hands. It never got used for guests, never got noticed. What else had I let them borrow in my name? The question didn't scream, it hummed. Low, constant, like a warning tone right before the power cuts out. I stayed after the last guest had gone. Didn't say I would, didn't have to. Nobody else picked up a chair, scraped plates, or stacked napkins. The laughter had faded, the porch lights dimmed, and all that remained were the scraps of a party I never asked for. Cake crumbs clung to the edges of folding tables. A lipstick-stained glass sat forgotten on the piano, catching what little moonlight broke through the curtains. Marla had vanished after dessert. Rhett disappeared without a word, like he'd clocked out of a job. Silas, upstairs by 9, snoring before the leftover chicken cooled. Funny thing about being helpful, people stop asking. They just expect. I wiped the tables slowly, like the motion might scrub the day off me. When I finally headed upstairs, the silence wasn't comforting. It echoed. In every corner of this house, I could hear what no one had said all evening, that this wasn't about me. I was just the glue holding their performance together. Morning came fast, the kind that doesn't gently arrive, it barges in. Sunlight streaked across the hallway, and I found a small box on the kitchen table. Rhett's name was on the card, scrawled like an afterthought. Inside was a watch. Not just any watch. It was the one I gave my father the year Mom died. Gold-plated, with a brown leather band. I had it engraved with, "To Dad, on the year we start over." That watch had meant something once. A symbol, a tether. Now it sat in this box, returned to me like it was a favor. The ribbon was new, but everything else was used, including the gesture. When I showed it to Silas, his response was brief. He didn't have time to shop. It's the thought that counts. No, it's the forgetting that counts. And it never stops counting. Breakfast was rushed, bacon burned on one side, eggs scrambled too dry. Marla stood near the coffee pot, stirring creamer into her mug like she owned the place. "You know," she said casually, "back when Mom was around, breakfast used to have meaning." I didn't respond. I sat on the stool by the stove, eating quietly, out of the way. Nobody noticed I'd been up first, cooking, setting the table, cleaning up the pan. The seat my mother used to sit in, empty. Nobody took it, nobody offered it. "You eat in the kitchen if you're working," Silas said without looking up. "It's just the flow." The flow, that's what they called this now. I flashed back to a Sunday morning years ago, me sitting in the church pew, my mother beside me. She leaned in once, held my hand, and whispered, "Sometimes staying quiet is grace. Sometimes it's erasure." Back then, I thought she meant hold your tongue to keep the peace. Now, I wonder if she regretted it, if the silence cost her more than anyone knew. I thought about all the family photos on the hallway wall. In every one, Marla stood behind Mom, tall and composed. I was always sitting, slightly off-center, knees together, hands folded, not forgotten, just positioned. Even in pictures, roles were assigned. Now they were assigning new ones. What should have been a wedding photo, me and Rhett, hand in hand, was already being treated like a church bulletin announcement. A union of reputations, not people. I hadn't chosen the location, the time, or even the photographer. It was a community affair, and I was just the face on the flyer. I stood in the living room after everyone left for errands or Sunday service. The house felt hollow. I looked around. The couch had throw pillows I didn't buy. The painting above the fireplace wasn't mine. Even the rug in the hallway had been replaced without anyone asking me. I started taking mental inventory. The kitchen? Marla redesigned it during her last visit, called it a surprise. The curtains in my room? Silas's church friend donated them. The bathroom shelves. Rhett installed them to help out. Each piece told me the same story. This wasn't my house anymore, not in the ways that counted. I ran my hand along the edge of the kitchen table, the same table my mother used to sit at, humming while folding towels. I waited for a feeling to come, something like nostalgia, but all I felt was vacancy. The house looks the same, but I can't find me in it. No one kicked me out. But little by little, they took ownership of pieces I didn't realize I'd given them. I didn't scream, didn't storm out, but something shifted. Deep, quiet, like a gear engaging after a long stall. A low tick inside me began. Not loud, not sharp, but steady. If you ignore a woman long enough, don't be surprised when her silence isn't yours anymore. It was still early, that quiet hour when the light feels like fog and the house hasn't woken up yet. I sat at the table with my coffee, staring through the kitchen window at the patch of garden my mother once called hers. The dirt was dry, the tomatoes had given up weeks ago. Just as I was about to reach for the sugar, there was a knock at the back door. Firm, not hesitant. I opened it to find Silas, Rhett, and a man I'd never seen before. The stranger wore a gray suit, thin tie, a practiced smile. "This is Mr. Greeley," Silas said. "He's a family legal advisor, just a formality." He stepped aside so Rhett could place a manila envelope on the kitchen table. "Don't worry," Silas added. "It's just paperwork to help with estate management. Makes things easier for everyone." I sat down slowly, the mug still in my hand. When I opened the envelope, I didn't see questions. I saw decisions. Transfer of ownership. My name as the seller. Rhett as co-signer. Terms I hadn't agreed to. Conditions I hadn't seen before. I looked up. None of them flinched. Rhett smiled and slid a small velvet box across the table. "For you," he said, "so you feel safe. About our future." Inside was a silver chain. Simple, understated. But I knew it immediately. It belonged to my mother. I'd given it to my father after she died, told him to keep it close. And now it was back, cleaned, packaged, tied with a ribbon like a party favor. "You gift me something I already gave?" I said softly. "That's not gratitude. That's laundering sentiment." Silas didn't answer. Mr. Greeley just sat still, glancing at Rhett. And Rhett? He chuckled like I was being difficult, like I didn't understand how good this all was. "It's just a step," Silas said again, this time slower, like he was talking to someone who didn't quite speak the language. "No one's taking anything. It's all in case something happens." Rhett folded his hands. "You've got people who care." "We're just making sure everything's in place." Mr. Greeley smiled. "Nothing changes today. This is all future-proofing." I thumbed through the pages. My birth date was wrong. The address outdated. One line, buried in paragraph 5, read, "Transfer is irrevocable upon signature." I stopped reading. This wasn't planning. It was consolidation. This wasn't about peace. It was about power. And they had rehearsed it. The rhythm in the room felt choreographed. The way Rhett leaned in, the way Silas softened his tone, the lawyer's calm deflection, a triangle of pressure pressing toward me. For a second, I thought about signing, just to make it stop, just to keep the peace, just to not be the woman who made trouble. I could walk away from the storm before it turned into one. But then I remembered that voicemail, the one I'd saved but hadn't played in years. Mom's voice. Cracked, but clear. "You don't owe people peace if it costs you your place." My hand tightened around the pen. I looked up. Rhett nodded, like he was sealing a deal. Silas nudged the paper closer. "Just sign here. We'll handle the rest." I put the pen down. "I think I'll have my own lawyer read this before I sign away my life." Silence. Cold. Thick. Silas's jaw tensed, barely. Rhett didn't hide his reaction. He sat back fast like he'd been slapped. Mr. Greeley cleared his throat, adjusted his papers. "Of course, we always recommend personal review. Absolutely." The balance shifted, almost imperceptibly. But it shifted. "Don't make this bigger than it is, Delaney," Silas muttered. I stood. "It already is. You just didn't think I'd notice." I picked up the pendant from the table, still in its box. I didn't wear it, I just held it. Cold, familiar, returned like a relic of a deal I never agreed to. None of them followed me as I walked out of the kitchen. That night, I didn't sleep. Not really. I laid in bed with a book open but unread, turning pages just to hear the sound. It was the only noise that didn't ask anything from me. Around 2 in the morning, my phone lit up. Rhett's name appeared, under a group message I hadn't realized I was part of. I opened it without thinking. The latest text read, "Everything's on track. Once the paperwork's signed, it's just cleanup." There were others before that, someone named Jason confirming a showing for the house next week. Another message said, "Make sure she doesn't stall. Silas said she's compliant but cautious." I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I just stared until the screen faded back to black. They weren't waiting on me to agree. They were just waiting for me to stop being in the way. I sat still for what felt like hours. Let the silence swell. When it got too loud, I put on a sweatshirt and walked out the front door. Vera's porch light was still on. She opened the door before I knocked, didn't ask anything, just stepped aside. We sat outside with lemon tea. The porch was warm, worn down, familiar in a way my own house hadn't felt in a while. "I saw your dad with a man in a suit a few weeks ago," she finally said. "They were walking around the backyard like they were measuring something." I didn't flinch, just waited. "I thought maybe it was insurance or something about taxes," she added, guilt curling around her words. "You thought what they wanted you to think," I said quietly. She looked down at her mug. "Did your mama know how this would end?" I stared out at the garden across the fence, the one my mom planted, the one Silas hadn't watered since the day she died. "She knew," Vera said. "She knew men like him don't stop until the house is empty, and they still ask why you're gone." I stayed until just before dawn. When I got back to the house, I went straight to the hall closet, pulled out a box labeled "Tax Files, Keep." Inside was the old ledger. I hadn't touched it in a while, but now it felt heavier. I sat at the kitchen table and flipped through it. $4.99, $12.73, $6, every Zelle, every transfer, every tiny obligation they'd covered and held over me. I used to think of it as kindness, but tonight I saw it for what it was. Control. A life cataloged, price-tagged, and delivered in fragments of generosity that they expected to own me for. I turned to the last page. Wrote, $0. Dignity withheld. I closed the book, wrapped it with a rubber band, slid it into the drawer. Done tracking. If they needed a balance sheet, they could build one from memory. I wouldn't do their accounting anymore. The house was still quiet when I made tea. I folded laundry while the kettle heated, refilled the printer paper tray, checked the folder with the house deed, labeled everything. This wasn't revenge. It was a record. I made a list. House deed, copy and scan. Mom's life insurance policy. Screenshots of Rhett's messages. Witness statement from Vera. I drafted an email to my cousin in Little Rock. She's a junior attorney. We hadn't spoken in 2 years. Subject line, "Just in case I go missing." In the body, I wrote, "I don't want to burn them. I just want to stop the rot from spreading." I attached everything. Hit save, not send, not yet. Later that night, as I was closing the blinds in my room, I heard a knock. Just once. The door cracked open. Silas stood there, not stepping inside. "You know," he said, "if you fight this, people will see you as bitter." I didn't answer. He glanced around the room. "This was always temporary. You knew that." "Yes," I said, "but the lie was yours, not mine." He didn't argue, just left the door half open behind him. I got up, walked over, and closed it quietly. Then I turned the lock. I didn't sleep much after locking that door. By sunrise, I was sitting at my desk, the drawer I'd avoided for more than a year cracked open. Dust still clung to the brass handle, like it had been waiting for a reason to be touched again. I slid it out slowly, found the file I knew was buried in the back. The purchase agreement, property deed, tax records, all in my name. No co-signers, no hidden clauses, no transfers. Every page stared back at me like a mirror I'd been afraid to look into. There it was. Delaney Marie Rhodes. Clear, unmistakable. I ran my finger along the ink, traced the notary stamp, read every line twice. He must have thought I forgot, or hoped I would. That I'd spent so long serving this house, I'd let go of owning it. But I didn't forget. I just stopped believing it mattered. Now I know better. Later that morning, I came down to find Silas waiting in the hallway, arms crossed like he had something serious to deliver. "Starting tomorrow," he said, "you'll be moving into the guest room." He didn't wait for me to speak, just kept going. "Rhett needs the master. He's working from home, needs space for files, meetings. It's just until things settle." I nodded once, walked past him. The guest room was smaller than I remembered, still dusty. Old sewing machine shoved in the corner, storage bins piled by the wall, holiday boxes on the floor. No one had been in there since Mom was alive. "You're still part of the house," Silas called out down the hall. "You're just not the center of it anymore." It wasn't demotion, it was declaration. I didn't argue, I didn't raise my voice, I just packed, one shirt at a time, folded with the care of someone saying goodbye to who she used to be. Not rage, not grief, something cleaner, clearer, control. By afternoon, I had scanned every legal document in that drawer, uploaded backups to my email, sent encrypted versions to my cousin Lydia, the attorney in Little Rock, with the subject line, "If anything happens to me." No drama, just structure. I called the county clerk's office, gave them the parcel number from the deed. "Still under your name?" the clerk said. "And no changes pending?" I asked. "No, ma'am. Only the listed owner can authorize a sale." "Good," I said. "That's still me." I didn't celebrate. I just hung up and sat back, letting the words settle around me like armor. I took out a new notebook, not for groceries or Zelle receipts. This one was different. I labeled it Record of Truth. Inside, I wrote down what I saw, what I heard, what they said when they thought I wouldn't catch it. The time Marla updated the kitchen without asking. The church bulletin listing Rhett's last name as if it were already mine. Silas telling a neighbor, "She's just holding it for now." They had trained me to see myself as a placeholder, as optional. As someone who should be grateful just to be included. That ends now. From this point forward, nothing about me is optional. I stood in the doorway of the guest room for a long time before stepping inside. It smelled like cedar and disuse. I opened a window, let the stale air out, made the bed, placed a framed photo on the desk, Mom holding me as a baby, one of the few pictures where I was in the center. I taped a note to the door. "This room is not for storage, it's for strategy." Around noon, Rhett walked by, saw the note, smirked. "Hope the room's not too small for your thoughts," he said. I smiled back, real quiet. "It's the exact size I need to think clearly." He walked off. I opened the drawer of the nightstand, slid the original deed inside, and locked it with the tiny brass key still hanging on its original string. No one had to know what I was planning. They'd see it soon enough. Tuesday afternoon, I came down the stairs to find the dining room already set, table extended, extra chairs pulled from the garage, cloth napkins I hadn't seen in years neatly folded beside mismatched plates. It looked like a rehearsal dinner for a wedding I never agreed to. Silas moved between seats like a conductor in front of an orchestra. Calm. Confident. He adjusted wine glasses, tapped forks into symmetry. Rhett arrived early, wearing a collared shirt and that fake smile he used at church potlucks. He helped place coasters, stood back to admire the table like it was his. Marla walked in last, holding a bottle of red she'd probably never tasted. She placed it dead center and bowed her head. "Father," she said, already halfway into prayer, "help us keep the family in harmony." I didn't say anything. Harmony wasn't on the menu. They called it a discussion dinner. But it was scripted, and I brought my own script. When the plates were full and the first round of fake laughter died down, Silas cleared his throat. "We've been thinking," he said, folding his hands like some preacher. "It's time to start planning shared responsibility. The house needs to reflect all of us." Marla chimed in, eyes on her wine glass. "Mom always said this house belonged to all of us anyway." I reached into my bag and placed the document on the table. It was my mother's life insurance policy. Signed, dated, clear. I looked directly at Marla. She left it for me, I said. She just didn't get the chance to defend it. Silence. You know that kind of silence that makes you feel like even the air's holding its breath? That's what filled that room. The clock on the wall ticked loud enough to feel disrespectful. I didn't look around for their reactions. I already knew. Next, I opened the folder I'd been building in private. Deed to the house, still in my name. Screenshots of texts from Rhett, including one where he called me compliant. A printed copy of the legal packet Silas had tried sliding in front of me last Sunday. I placed them all neatly on the table like a second meal. This isn't to hurt you, I said. It's to stop you from hurting me. Rhett leaned back, lips tight. Silas's jaw didn't move, but his ears flushed. Marla looked like she wanted to melt into her chair. I took a breath. You say the table was set, I continued. But you forgot. I built the table. That's when Marla tried to pivot. You're taking this wrong, she said. We were just looking out for the family. I smiled without showing teeth. I am family, but not your fool. Rhett opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. You were here for the closing papers, not the ceremony. They didn't argue with that. Couldn't. You didn't pay for this house. You didn't fix the plumbing. You didn't drive Dad to 3 years of appointments. You didn't skip dates, jobs, or a life to keep the lights on here. Marla whispered. We contributed in other ways. I have receipts, I said. You have assumptions. Right then, the door creaked open behind us. Vera stepped in. She held a folder in one hand, glasses in the other. No one had invited her. I had. She placed the document in front of Silas, a notarized statement, confirming that she saw him show the house to a man in a suit, twice, without telling me. That was the last crack in the floor. I didn't scream, didn't flip the table or cry. I stood. You're welcome to finish your wine, I said, but I won't serve a lie at my table. I walked to the photo wall in the hallway, removed one frame, us as a family, everyone smiling in front of the house. I slipped it out of the glass, replaced it with a photo of my mother standing alone in the garden. She had dirt on her gloves, wind in her hair, and pride in her eyes. I walked back into the dining room. Didn't raise my voice, didn't look at anyone too long. Then I turned and closed the door to the guest room behind me. Not a slam, but loud enough to feel final. We gathered again that evening. Same room, same chairs, but the air wasn't the same. Silas had called it an urgent follow-up discussion, said it was just to smooth out misunderstandings. Told Vera to bring dessert, Marla to bring calm. Rhett came in like he was about to lead the conversation, confident, clean-shaven, tie too tight. They thought I was walking into their setup again. They didn't realize I'd written a new script. I walked in with a folder in one hand and my phone in the other. Sat down without a word. Waited until every face was looking at me. Silas, arms folded. Marla, already tensed like she was bracing for wind. Rhett, playing neutral but leaning forward like he expected applause. I played the audio. I didn't preface it. Didn't explain it. Just tapped the screen and let Rhett's own voice fill the room. She's almost there. Just let her sign it. Once the paper's in, it's cleanup. Another voice asked, Does she know about the showing next week? No, Rhett said. And she won't until the keys change hands. Rhett tried to speak. I held up my hand. You've already said enough. Silas shifted in his seat, didn't look surprised, just disappointed that the control slipped. Marla's fingers curled around her glass so tight I thought it might break. I pulled out the envelope, unsealed it slowly, removed the letter inside. Vera stood quietly by the door. She nodded once when I looked her way. She'd helped my mother write it months before she died. I'd never opened it until that morning. The letter was in my mother's handwriting, shaky but still hers. To my daughter, if you're reading this, I'm not around to say it aloud. I always feared that your kindness would be used against you. You stayed, not because you had to, but because you chose us. This house belongs to you. I folded the letter gently. No one moved. Even the clock on the wall had gone quiet, or maybe my ears had. I didn't read it for sympathy. I read it because that letter was the last time someone loved me without asking for something in return. Silas chuckled. A letter like that doesn't hold in court. He wasn't wrong, but I smiled. Not wide, just enough. No, but the deed and insurance do. I laid them out one by one. Photocopies for everyone. The house deed. Still in my name, life insurance, all directed to me. Copies of Rhett's texts. Every one, printed. A scan of the legal packet Silas tried to push in front of me last week. Rhett mumbled something about context. I looked at him. I didn't raise my voice. I raised evidence. Marla stood, pacing now. This wasn't supposed to go this far, she said. You're making it something it's not. No, I said. You made it something I can't ignore. She sat back down. You don't get to narrate my story anymore. Then came the move they didn't expect. I've already filed a legal hold on the property, I said. No one sells, no one moves anything without my signature. I didn't raise my tone, just kept laying bricks. My cousin in Little Rock is now listed as power of attorney for any future dispute. Everything's recorded. Rhett's mouth opened, but nothing came out. This isn't revenge, I said. This is repair. They didn't ask what that meant. They knew. I turned to Rhett. You have 3 days to move out. Then to Silas. You can stay, but you'll respect the owner. That was it. No yelling, no dishes thrown. Just truth. I folded the letter, slid it into my coat pocket, walked to the photo wall, looked at the people who had tried to edit me out of my own life. I didn't need to slam a door, I said in my head, because what I brought with me slammed harder. I closed the door behind me, didn't look back. Vera's voice followed me down the hallway. That girl didn't burn the house down. She rebuilt the fire inside her. The house was still. No knocking at my door. No footsteps overhead. No voices bouncing off the hallway walls trying to control the temperature of the room. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the slow shift of morning light sliding across the floorboards. I sat on the porch with my coffee. No cream. Just black, like always. My mother's garden, now more wild than tended, breathed quietly under the sun. Weeds and all, it still looked more honest than the people who once claimed to care about it. The storm had passed, but the soil remembers. Rhett was gone, packed up and out the next day, like a tenant on deadline. Marla hadn't called since. Silas. He stayed. But we hadn't spoken in days. Not about what happened. Not about anything. No apologies. No explanations. Just space. And oddly enough, that was enough. I didn't feel victorious. I felt something closer to clear. They didn't change, but I no longer needed them to. Inside, I opened the drawer in my nightstand. The small brass key was still there, resting under the envelope from my mother. I reached for it, pulled out the old backdoor key, the one she gave me when I was 17, tiny numbers engraved just above the teeth, 1976, my birth year. I'd forgotten what it meant, thought it was just a sentimental gesture, but now it meant everything. I walked to the kitchen and laid it gently on the table. Next to it, a copy of the deed, highlighted where it listed my name, bold and legal. I scribbled a note on the back of a grocery list. For memories, not access. That house wasn't just walls and windows. It was witness, to silence, to service, to all the things I swallowed instead of said. I packed light. I didn't need much. One framed photo of my mother, standing in the garden in boots too big for her feet. The ledger, blank now, pages torn out, pages burned. One remained with that final line, $0 under dollars, dignity withheld, and the tea cloth, the one I knit for Dad and laid out every morning for 12 years. The same one he never once commented on, but I brought it with me, because it was mine, because it was quiet, because it was never for him. I walked out to the front yard just as the sun hit the porch rail. Silas was sitting in his usual spot. Didn't look up when I passed, just kept staring out at the edge of the property line like something was missing. I paused. He didn't speak. Eventually he said, "You always were stronger than I gave you credit for." I stood still. "And you always mistook silence for weakness." He nodded once, slow, said nothing more. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. There are some goodbyes that don't need a ceremony, just clarity. We weren't enemies, not anymore, but we weren't pretending either. I stepped back inside and took one last walk through the house. Every room had its own kind of ghost. The dining room still held echoes of raised voices and unspoken rules. The hallway smelled faintly of my mother's old soap. The guest room, mine now, briefly, had clean sheets and a single empty drawer. I stopped at the photo wall, took down the one where they had me off to the side, barely framed, slid the photo out, left the frame empty. In its place, I pinned up a small image of my mother alone in the garden. No family around her. Just dirt under her nails, wind in her face, and peace in her eyes. I whispered, "This was yours. I just kept the lights on." I didn't look back when I stepped outside. The truck started on the first turn. On the passenger seat, a box with everything that mattered. In my hand, a new set of keys, this time for a rental house in Little Rock. Nothing fancy. But mine? I didn't lose a home. I reclaimed a boundary. And as I pulled out of the driveway for the last time, I didn't cry, didn't smile. Just breathed. Family should be where you're safe, not where you're silent. And silence was the last thing I ever gave them.